Kansas State is looking to add another big-time shooter in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. We're going to dive into some portal chatter today, an official visit taken for the Kansas State Wildcats, another MAC player. We're going to dive into the potential of him joining the team and if it's a good thing or not, if it's a good fit. We're also going to talk about the state of the roster, and then we'll end this show answering the question of how to get the trust back for the fans for this men's basketball team after missing the tournament 2 years in a row. Before we do that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, on Wednesday, there was an official scheduled visit for Bowling Green's big man forward, Marcus Johnson. And I say big man in a different term when you're thinking basketball, and it's quite frankly the elephant in the room when you are talking about this player. And I don't think it has to be the narrative, but everyone's talking about it. This guy is a big dude. He is a big guy, a space eater, 6'7", but 265. When you think about the last couple seasons of NCAA basketball, you might think about DJ Burns from North Carolina State, maybe a Zach Randolph from years past. I've heard that potential comp. This is a guy that would create space. He's not that big man type of play that you would expect to try and fill in the five. He's more of a wing player with that size. So that's where it kind of comes in and makes it a little bit interesting for his addition. Now, he had an official visit on Wednesday. We are sitting up Friday right now and haven't heard any confirmation. So we're not sure if he was a good fit or if he's going to be a Kansas State Wildcat. But we're going to dive into it anyways. And we'll talk about if it's a good idea to add a second Johnson to the team, because we already added Nate Johnson, the MAC Player of the Year, for this past portal season as well. This is another MAC player coming over from Bowling Green. Now, Bowling Green did not have a good season this past year. They were not good whatsoever. Now, the MAC was actually really bad overall. And then if you were just not good in the MAC, you're just showing you weren't a good team. He was the best player on a really bad team, 8th in the MAC, 14-18 on the season. Obviously, no postseason play for Bowling Green. But what Marcus Johnson did was impressive. 16.2 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, and just under 2 assists per game on the season. Played in all 32 games, started in all 32 games, played 32 minutes, 31.4 to be exact, per game, and shot 43% from the field, including just under 40% from the three-point line, 39.4 to be exact. What is wildly interesting about those three-pointers, because when you're thinking a guy that's 6'7", 265, you're thinking about a guy that is probably going to be in the paint doing a lot of work. That's not the case. He's shooting a lot of things from the outside. He had 198 three-point attempts, with 78 for 198. So just like another addition who was on a bad team as well, in Bashir, who we added earlier in this transfer portal, a player that is not afraid to shoot the three ball. It really looks like Kansas State is going in a different route with this roster addition. Now, I'm not sure if I like it, and we'll get into that in the second segment when we talk about the state of the roster so far heading into the end of May here, as we're getting closer and closer to what we like to think of this June 1st cutoff of having your roster ready, because players report and you start getting into that mode where you start building and hopefully buying in with this new culture that was not evident last season. So it looks like they're changing to a more offensive styled approach. They're not afraid maybe to add in some subpar defense because they think they can fix that, because Jerome Tang and his coaching staff has always been known to have good defense, but they've failed as of lately in the shooting aspect. Now, they just averaged over 70 points per game last season, and they really didn't have a consistent shooter to lead that charge. Now, will Marcus Johnson be that guy? I don't think so if he decides to join this team. And there's a couple reasons why I don't think that. Now, first off, Let's go with that elephant in the room. 265 for 6'7", and he's not your big guy. That's could be a problem heading into going from the MAC to the Power 4. It could be. I'm not saying it's going to be. We're talking about a guy that started in all the games, played 30-something minutes per game, and it sounds like he did just fine with that size. This is going to be a different level, though, and we are going to see him have to make certain adjustments. His defense was very bad, very subpar, as I mentioned, just like Bashir. So if you are trying to maybe better his defense, if he's not going to play down low, potentially be your 3, or maybe when you play small ball, maybe you can shift to your 4. You're going to have better defense. And that might mean he has to drop some weight. So he's not your average big man. He's more of like a wing, but he shoots very well in that aspect. Kansas State has a lot of wings right now, and they are missing in other places. But this might not be a bad idea if he decides to join Kansas State. He's a proven scorer. Maybe not a proven winner because of Bowling Green not being very good, but Kansas State had a losing record last year as well. You want to bring winning mentality to the team, but at this point in time in the season, in the portal, when you're only less than 2 weeks left until that June 1st kind of cutoff, and it's a very unofficial cutoff. It's just the kind of the date that you look for saying you want that roster ready to go. And he's not the only player that Kansas State's looking for. There's a couple other players overseas that potentially still might be joining the squad. We'll talk about in next segment. But if you bring in a great shooter, even though they have terrible defense, you are going to have to make some major adjustments, something that was not happening last season with Kansas State. You're going to have a lot of shooting, meaning that you're probably going to shoot a lot more, a lot sooner, especially if you have Bashir and Marcus Johnson on the court at the same time. Both of them who are not afraid to throw up the three-point shot at any point in time if they have any type of space, meaning you're probably going to shoot a lot sooner in the shot clock, meaning if you don't get those offensive rebounds, you're going to be back on the defensive side a lot sooner. And that could be a problem if you have a defensive efficiency issue. So something to keep in mind on that one. Now, Marcus Johnson did not play a lot of Power 5, but just like Bashir, a lot of comps to Bashir just in how they played last season, basically just on the schedule. Nothing else about Bashir do they match. I mean, they're 6'7", but I think Bashir's like 190. He's 265, right? But we saw Marcus Johnson, and he also played one Power 4 school last season. And just like Bashir with Monmouth, they played against Michigan State. And he did okay against Michigan State. Now, when I say okay, it's you got to take it with a grain of salt. If you look at just the small type of stats, just like the regular box score, he scored 23 points, not bad, 37.5% from the field, but that was 9 for 24. And he was also 1 for 11 from 3-point in that game. So he struggled with shooting, but he kept shooting because he was the best player on that squad, had to keep going, still found a way to get 23 points, even with that bad stat line. So take that as you will. That's really the only case you have, the only type of sample size you have against a Big Ten school, and in this case, any Power 4 school last season when he was with Bowling Green. His highest on the season, I believe, was 28, and his 28 points came against Toledo. That was also in a loss. So if he came to a team that maybe it doesn't mean he has to be on a starting squad, maybe comes off the bench, can be a role player, and when he's in that position, he can play great from the wing and maybe see some improvement on defense, he could be an asset to this team. If you're worried about his type of consistency based on his endurance, well, I wouldn't be, because he found a way to do that with 31 minutes per game in the MAC, where he had to be the dude. So assuming that he probably won't get 31 minutes at Kansas State, maybe even cut that in half, he'll have the opportunity to do really well, I think, if he becomes a Kansas State Wildcat. Everything is all determined if he actually decides to commit. Nothing set in stone. He did have that official visit on Wednesday, though, and the biggest question will obviously be, will his game translate to the Power 4? There was not many other rumblings about Marcus Johnson going anywhere else either. That's something to keep in mind. He's not really being chased by other teams that I can find. He's been in the transfer portal since the middle of March, and it is the middle of May. So does that mean red flags? Or does that mean Jerome Tang has found himself a diamond in the rough? I'll let you be the judge of that. And while we are thinking that process, what do you think about Marcus Johnson? Do you think he should be a good addition to the Kansas State Wildcats? We're going to dive into the state of the roster, the whole roster, what's still missing, and what does Jerome Tang need to do to get the trust back from his fans? We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Game Time, my favorite moment in the NBA playoffs because the NBA playoffs are here. 2013 NBA Finals. Ray Allen game-tying shot in Game 6 against the Spurs. You hear the call, boom. It was fantastic. Intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fan losing their minds. It's that kind of atmosphere that you must be and experience live, and that's why this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats. Even for the biggest playoff games, prices on the apps actually drop closer to tip-off, and with that killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I wish, in hindsight, I was be able to go to that game and watch Ray Allen watch that. Could you imagine sitting courtside or at least close and having that just amazing shot hit? You could do that with Game Time. I was looking at the app just a few days ago, checking out some Celtic stuff before the Tatum injury, actually, and the zone deals were offering 60% off in actually pretty great sections. I love that you can see exact views before I buy. No surprises. The app makes it ridiculously simple. 2 taps, I'm done. And with the Game Time guarantee, you'll know you're getting a best deal if you find the better price in the same row and section. They credit you 110% of the difference. It is a no-lose situation. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button because we are growing every single day, bringing you Kansas State Wildcats coverage like no one else here on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. We're diving into a scheduled visit that just happened a few days ago by Marcus Johnson out of Bowling Green. Big guy on campus, if you will. 6'7", 265, but not in the big way that you expect. So what does that mean for the state of the roster for Kansas State? They obviously have still some holes to fill, but do you go in what direction? That's the biggest question. What direction do you finish this roster off? Because I'm going to be completely frank with you, which I feel like I always am on this show. I'm not that impressed by this roster right now. As we sit here in the middle of May, I am underwhelmed by the names of this roster. And if I was going to bet about if Kansas State could make the NCAA tournament after missing it the last 2 years in a row, looking at who we have on this roster, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not feeling great. I don't have that warm and fuzzy inside me right now thinking that this is going to be a team that can make the dance. I really don't. And if Marcus Johnson decides to join, that still doesn't change it. There still needs to be a big splash. And I'm not saying it has to be a big splash like they did with last year with Coleman Hawkins, where they waited till after the draft and then they decided to go after that, throwing a lot of money to a player that at one point didn't seem like actually fit based on the team needs and things like that. Now, once Chor left, that was a different story maybe. But you right now sit in a spot that have a lot of combo guards and a lot of wings. That's really where you're sitting at the moment right now. And if you look at the state of the roster, and right now you technically have 9 players. And we'll go through them right now so you can make sure. I saw some comments asking what was the players and all that case may be. You have technically 3 seniors with Tyreek Smith, who's waiting on a waiver. So he's still kind of up in the air, but you still have him. You have Kamari McGriff, who came over in the portal. Nate Johnson, who came over in the portal. Then you have some of the returning players like Taj Manning and Moby. Then you have David Castillo. You also have Abdir Bashir. And then the 2 freshmen, Xavier Wilson, and technically an international guy, if you want to consider him a freshman, so be it, Andre Kostick. That's 9. That's where we sit right now. 9 players. So you either have 4, 5, or 6 open scholarships left, depending on how many you actually want to put on the roster. You can have up to 15, but the big expectation is K-State will only use about 13 of them before the season needs to go. So, as of right now, officially, they still need to fill 4, 5, or 6 roster spots. If they give one to Marcus Johnson, and then there's another international player out there, Elias Rapique, that we're seeing a lot of rumblings about, potentially him also joining the squad. Let's just assume those 2 add to the roster. That still means you have to add at least 2, potentially 4 more players to this roster before the season comes. Now, I would like to hear at least 2 more names other than Rapique and Johnson if they decide to join before that June 1st deadline that we like to just give ourselves. And again, that is an unofficial deadline. It's just a thought process with the deadline because you want to make sure that your players are ready to go. And I think that deadline that we are talking about here is more important than it ever has been for Kansas State. And it sounds like we're not going to hit it because the last 2 years there have been issues with either removing players from the team, just not having a buy-in, if you will. For the first half of the season, all we could talk about with Coach Tang was the culture of the squad, and it was just not there. If you have a problem starting off strong this next season, you can immediately go back to right now in the middle of May, and especially if they don't add anything by June 1st, and wonder why we didn't have a full roster ready to go or dang near close by this June 1st type where everybody's supposed to report and get ready to go. Again, just around this time period. Because right now, we're not ready. And that's probably another reason why I am feeling completely underwhelmed by this roster. So you can have 2 routes to go. You can take 2 routes to add those other players. And with Rapique and Johnson, as I mentioned, this doesn't change my thought process here. You can go and add best available, which never hurts, especially right now. And I think this is actually my more preferred method for the record. Based on this roster you have as we sit right now, I am underwhelmed. I don't think this is an NCAA tournament roster. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong. And I hope they just shatter all expectations that I have right now and make me look stupid, eat my shorts, whatever the case may be. I hope that is the case. But right now, I just don't feel good about it. So if you go for best available, whether that is another wing player, another combo guard, maybe you do wait towards the NBA type of moments where players decide to come back instead of entering into the draft after they go through the process and realize they're probably not going to be a pick or they're going to be a late round 2 pick and they're going to have to work their way into the G League. Might as well come and get some NIL money and try and raise your draft stock, something like Coleman Hawkins did this past season. Now, I don't really think that helped Coleman Hawkins this past season. Doesn't mean that's the case for any other player that can come out. I think that hurts Kansas State's chances in adding one of those players because of Coleman Hawkins, since Jerome Tang is still here, but it doesn't make it impossible. So that could be one route. There's also some other players still available in the transfer portal that are not doing the NBA route that are still pretty great. You obviously have to make some more additions. There's still some international players that you could go after. We talk about Rapique as well. Matthew Gruchuk, I have heard not much about him lately, but if he was an addition, my mind change would be a little different. I would think this roster would be starting to make a little more sense because I think he has NBA level talent. But right now we're not hearing his name as much, so I don't know if he's still in the rumblings. But the best player available, other than Johnson, other than Rapique, those 2 extra spots, if we're going to stay at 13, I think that's where you have to go. You have to go best player available. Not care if you get a wing or a combo guard. And the reason I keep saying those 2 positions is because my second method, and this might be the route they actually take, is we don't have a lot of 5s on the team and not many 1s, not many true point guards. And I think we can go out and say and ask the question, is David Castillo, we kind of talked about this before, is he a true point guard, 1? And 2, is he going to be ready, if he is a true point guard, to take the realms and be that guy this next season? A lot of questions remain about potentially Jerome Tang's only win in recruiting so far with David Castillo. He is technically his biggest win as of right now in recruiting, true recruiting, not transfer portal recruiting. David Castillo, the lone freshman last year, now the lone sophomore in the squad as of right now. So is he ready And if not, do you have a true point guard on the team? Now, you can run multiple combo guards if you feel comfortable, if that's the case. And if you go best player available, I don't hate that route. But you got to make a decision. And I think you got to do it soon because we are sitting at May 16th as of right now. And we don't have that right answer at the moment. And of course, the five. When you're talking about the big men, who's still available, you've lost a couple of the players that you're already looking at. I don't know what you do there. But as of right now, you have a team that's most likely going to play small ball. And I think that could be an issue for two different reasons. One, if you have players like Marcus Johnson, if he decides to commit, and of course, Abdi Bashir, who's already on the squad, reigning 3-point attempts when the shot clock is still pretty decent, meaning you're going to take multiple one of those shots per game. A good chance is your points per possession will probably drop, which also means that if you don't rebound well, which we didn't do great last year, and it looks like we're not going to do that great this year just based on this roster, you're going to lose possessions over and over again. Oh, and might I add, some of these shooters that we're focusing on are terrible on defense. So if you find a player in the portal whose main responsibility might not be scoring, but is a dominant rebounder, that might be a good idea. That might actually fill both my needs of taking care of a five and being best player available for the needs of Kansas State. So a lot of things that can still happen with the state of the roster. This won't be the last time that we revisit it. But as of right now, we are sitting officially at 9. I think we are going to get to 11, assuming that Marcus Johnson commits, assuming that Elias Repeat commits. That still leaves 2 spots, 2 names at minimum that I'd like to hear before that June 1st deadline that we like to talk about. So with all that being said, there's a lot of things that are going on with Kansas State basketball. Have missed the dance, the NCAA tournament for 2 seasons now, folks. For 2 seasons. And that buy-in is no longer there. How you get that buy-in back? Well, you got to build a roster. And they're not doing that as fast as I want them to. That Houston model, it's out the window until we start talking about it next season. And I don't know if that's the right route to take if you're not happy about your roster, if you feel underwhelmed about it. A lot of things to get this roster back in shape. But the biggest thing is, how do you get the fan trust back? Let's talk about that as we finish up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Wayfair. The days are getting longer and the weather is warming up and people are spending more time outside, which means it's perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony, Wayfair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. Wayfair's massive selection of outdoors essentials and makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversations into sleek dining tables, outdoor decor, they've got it all, and the prices fit your budget. I had just these small, normal fold-out lawn chairs when I wanted to have this bonfire and nice fireplace set up at my place. I used Wayfair to find me some nice patio equipment so I could not look like a slouch when I had some friends over. And they have new patio dining sets, some string lights from Wayfair to help you extend your outdoor space. You can just mix styles any way you wish you want. Wayfair has it all. Delivery is free and hassle-free, even for that big stuff. So you don't have to worry about spending the extra dollar to get it shipped to you. So shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. And welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. How do we get the fans' trust back? And do you feel like you don't have trust? Do you feel like you not trust this team as of right now? Maybe Jerome Tang's coaching staff? What is it that you feel about the men's basketball team as of right now? Let me know in the comment description below if you're watching on YouTube. I'd really appreciate that. I'd want to know your thoughts and your feelings about this team, because I think I've been pretty clear with it. And I've tried to be as optimistic as I possibly can. And this last episode before this, talking about Jerome Tang, I think I went on a little rant, if you will, because I think we're at a point where we're not being aggressive enough. And it's just really, really tough to be optimistic when you're heading into potentially a third season when you are no longer dancing. So, how do you win the fans' trust back? I think the simplest answer, and I think the easiest answer to say out loud, is winning, of course. You know, but how far away from that point are we? Are we ready to start winning? We talk about how Jerome Tang a few years ago, after beating Kansas, and Lawrence jumps up on the table, says, "Get ready to start winning again." Like, are we there? But it seems like we're going into a full rebuild, and it's not seems like we did. We went into a full rebuild for the third straight season. It's not the right way to get into this winning culture. And I go back to what Jerome Tang said all season long in the press conference, saying how he really wanted to focus on this Houston model, this retention model, where he wanted to bring players back and get them happy about being a part of Kansas State. And we didn't see that happen. We thought we might because they started very slow in the portal. No one left in the portal at the very beginning. Things were looking good. Doug McDaniel didn't hit their name in the portal. Then Hassan hit. Then we saw McDaniel hit. Then things started falling apart, at least in the eyes of the potential Houston model. We also saw a commit decide to go elsewhere. Now, that might have been a mutual decision, but regardless, it doesn't change the fact that we struggle with recruiting and we're having to put all our eggs in the transfer portal basket. And in the last 2 years, dare I say, we're 0 for 2, because I think you have to say we're 0 for 2 because we didn't make the dance. As exciting it was to have Coleman Hawkins on the team after being known for being a top NIL spender, it wound up didn't work. It was a dysfunctional team. I think there was a lot of talent on that squad. They underperformed. I think that's easy to say because there's no way in my mind heading into the season that I think this team was going to be a team with a losing record. I thought this was a team with second weekend NCAA tournament aspirations at minimum, and it didn't happen. When I look at this roster, I think the talent level is a lot lower than what we had last year. Now, it doesn't, to me, I don't think that means you're going to have a losing record, but I don't think that means you're also making the NCAA tournament either. Maybe in the middle of those two things. And that's not a good place to be at either, especially in the Big 12, who, dare I say, had a down year last year. That's not going to happen again. That's not going to happen next year. You're assuming that Kansas is going to figure it out. Baylor's reloaded. Arizona, although had a good year, I think you're always going to have to assume they're going to be good now that they're in the Big 12. BYU has spending money like no one. And, I mean, Texas Tech is doing it in the football side. BYU is bringing in some amazing players from the recruiting trail and things like that. Top player in AJ Dismesta. I think I said his name right. There's so many things. That's all in the Big 12, let alone what's going on across the country. So you have to find a way to be tough in the Big 12 conference. And if you're not, even if you are just subpar, you find yourself to go 10-10, or if they decide to stick to 20 games or drop down, I think they're actually going to drop down. But if you find a way to go 500, that's fine as long as you have a solid non-conference record heading into Big 12 play, something you did not have last year. And that all stems on the fact that you didn't have this buy-in early in the season and you weren't ready to play basketball. We're getting close to that June 1st period where players are supposedly starting to report and get ready to, ramp up for the season. With 9 players on the roster, if you were worried about them not being ready last year, how can you not feel the same way this year if you only have 9 guys on your roster as of right now? That's what I'm trying to say. So it's hard for me to say, how do you win this trust back other than winning? And obviously that's the easiest thing to do, but I can't call this team a tournament team right now. Can I even call them a Big 12 contender? No, I can't, because I think the Big 12 is going to be better this next season. Everybody loved to talk about the SEC, how great of a season they had. That's going to be a one-off in my mind. I think the Big 12 is going to be right back to dominance, being known as the basketball conference in America this next season. And I'd love to have Kansas State be in that fold, being known as the top of the Big 12. I just don't feel that way looking at this roster. So he's got to finish building this roster strong, because I don't think there's a single dollar amount that keeps him in Manhattan if he has another season like this over the past 2 years. I don't think the buyout is going to matter. if he can't figure it out after year 3. I really don't. So he needs to find players that have this buy-in that he keeps talking about right away, because he cannot afford for the 3rd year in a row to kick off another player off the team like he has over the past 2 seasons, and then try and figure out how to win back the locker room, because it just won't cut it, because that seemed to be the problem. Talks about this buy-in, talks about whatever the case may be. The Buddy Rich situation where he wouldn't even talk about it on the mic. There was an issue in the locker room. There was rifts between him and Doug McDaniel, his starting point guard, earlier in the year too. He turned it into this conversation about the team buying in, but I think he lost the locker room. I think he truly lost the locker room because the talent was absolutely there, but they underperformed. Now, why is that? Can't let that happen again in year 3, or there has to be changes. And I'm not talking about a simple 1 or 2 assistant coaches. I'm talking about major changes if they can't find themselves back in the dance, even in the first 4. I mean, field of 68, Kansas State has to get there, or we got to start making some big changes for sure. No doubt about that in my mind. I appreciate you very much for checking out and listening to this show and making Locked On Kansas State your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. So be the most informed fan on rapid changes to college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I love it. Thank you so much. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.